Are Chinese drones spying on American agriculture? That's the question, and a whole bunch more talking about drone technology and the future of agriculture in this episode of The Business of Agriculture. Hey, Damian Mason here with a question before we hop into this episode of The Business of Agriculture. If you farm for a living, you employ a lot of amazing technology, from your inputs that you put into the soil to the tractor that you sit in, your combine, and the amazing data that it harvests. But has your soil analytics kept up technologically with everything else in your farming operation? I would venture to say that no, it is not. Sure, you check for your nitrogen, your phosphorus, your potassium, your micronutrients as well. But what about disease pressure? Do you know what diseases and what pests you're going to face next year? No, you don't. But you can now figure that out with Pattern Ag's predictive analytics. Think about it. They can tell you now with testing what the likelihood of facing nasty diseases, things like cyst nematode or sudden death syndrome, what the likelihood of you having this in your field, then you know how to prepare, how to treat, and where to invest your money. It's using technology to make you bigger yields and therefore make you bigger money. Go to www.pattern.ag to learn more. They are pioneering the way in predictive agronomy. Hey there, welcome to another fantastic episode of The Business of Agriculture. Got a great one for you today. I've got Arthur Erickson, the CEO of Hylio. He's a co-founder of this company. Company's been in the drone for agriculture space for almost a decade, and I'm asking him the question, are Chinese drones spying on American agriculture? The usage of drones is obviously blown up, right, in the last couple of years. In a previous episode, I had on somebody, if you're a fan of the show, we had people from the North American Ag Aviation Association on. We talked about the future of manned aircraft and unmanned aircraft in agriculture. We've hit on this before, but there's this reality that one of the main companies that supplies drones for use on the fields of America are from China. And we know that our phones listen to us. We know that if you said the word lampshade 100 times, you would end up having, if your phone in front of you, you will end up with ads on Facebook telling you about lampshades. So we do know that we're being listened to. Whether you think I'm a conspiracy wacko or not, it's true. We also know that there's technology that is being used by those that want to replace America, those that want to be our replacement as the world superpower. And there is this real concern. So Arthur, I opened with that question. Are we being spied on?
Short answer, yes. And to your point, we're being spied on by everyone and everything. So that's phones, robot vacuums, your radio, your TV, whatever. So by Americans, Chinese, you name it. It's not just Chinese companies that are doing this.
Yeah. So I said that, and if you're watching, I'm just holding up my phone, soon to be replaced with the new iPhone 15. Again, a friend of mine that used to think that I was a little bit crazy about this, saying, you realize you're being listened to. He and I talked about tractors with a third person, and his phone was on and out, and the word tractor came up about 100 times, and a particular brand of tractor. And then he said, hey, you're right. I logged on Facebook the very next day, and I've got ads coming to me for tractors. Like, I live in a house in the suburbs. What the hell would I need a tractor for? I said, well, because you got to listen to. So that's happening. We are being spied upon, like you said, from everything from our phones to sweepers to whatever. The situation with drones is a tough one. What do you think is happening?
To put it shortly, I think that, okay, let me say this. They wouldn't be good spies if it was super obvious what they were spying on and how they were doing it. So we're going to use a little bit of deductive reasoning here, but essentially a lot of the controversy arose because some reporters and journalists dug into the connections between one of the largest industry players in the drone space, which is DJI, very well-known company. They have at least, I'd say 70 or 80% of the global drone market, so a virtual monopoly. But back in, I believe, 2017 or 2018, some reporters dug in and found that the company DJI does have significant financial ties to the Chinese government itself. And so they had previously denied any sort of financial involvement, but essentially there are state-backed financial institutions that are invested into DJI. So what happens in China, which is different, at least ostensibly, than here in the States, is that any company is required by their law to give up information or data to their government. So if their government walks in and says, hey, we want data on every single user in the United States, what they sprayed, how much they sprayed, what crops they're growing, what their yields are, they are obligated by their government, their laws and their version of their constitution, which I don't even know if they call it that, obviously, but whatever they have.
I think you're being very gratuitous to call whatever the hell happens under the Chinese Communist Party constitution. But okay.
Sure, it's a living document, right? Whatever it is, I'm sure it's evolving. But the point is, they have to give this information up. So there are protections, at least ostensibly here in the United States. A company doesn't necessarily have to give up that private information or that critical information to our government, but they do have to do that there. So it's just a matter of like absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? It's almost naive, right, to imagine that the government wouldn't take advantage of that relationship that they have with this company. This company is gathering all sorts of data across the U.S., but basically every country in the world, and it's sensitive military data, possibly it's good economic data, so it's information on where our electricity grid is, where the key access points are, what our yields are, so back to agriculture, all of that. They're gathering all of that. It would be, I think, stupid to assume that the government isn't somehow leveraging that information.
Yeah, and I already used the word conspiracy, and I gave the example of my buddy that probably thought I was a little out there when I talked about I said that we were obviously being listened to. Our data is, they always talk about, oh well, your data was breached by this company that had your credit card. And I'm like, hell, is this even news anymore? I'm also being watched. My every online purchases. Clearly, this goes on and on and on. So, Arthur, it would be naive to, like you said, to assume that the country that clearly targets us, I believe that we are targeted. My connections in the military tell me that China is at war with the United States. It's just that somehow we don't know it. Technologically, cyber attacks, these kinds of things. So it'd be naive to almost dangerous to assume that this isn't happening. So I own the drone. Let's say I own this DJI drone that you said covers 70% of agricultural drone market in the world. At least. And I'm using it. And I'm using it out here in my fields. That data is supposed to be coming to me. How does China get it?
Basically, all their products are linked up to a cloud system. So what it is, it's pretty normal stuff, which is like, okay, you're going to need access to the internet to download updates for the product, and you're going to sync your flight logs with their cloud service, and essentially you sign like the terms of service like you would with your iPhone, where you're basically giving them carte blanche to do whatever they want with your data. But you don't read that. I don't read that. No one reads that. So right. You're basically saying, hey, you can take my data, do whatever you want with it. And they say that, oh, it's going to be used to improve the product experience and this and that. But of course, as we know with even American companies, it's not just to improve the end user's experience. It's often to sell to third parties for additional revenue. So maybe you're selling to an insurance company, or you're selling to advertising.
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, we know that, like, for instance, yes, I get targeted now by hell, who knows what, like you said, insurance company because of whatever. Yeah, you buy a new car, you get 9 insurance ads, immediately, whatever. Yeah. Same thing. You buy a house, in the old days it was mail, but yeah, you get targeted with home warranties and all this kind of thing. But the danger here is it's not just to sell you something. It's to actually, it is truly surveillance. And that's what your concern is. And that's what my concern would be.
Yeah, I think a lot of Americans don't really understand the mindset of the Chinese government and their strategic goals. They're much more, I'd say, long thinking than we are, generally speaking. And that's a symptom of just the way the government is structured. Like we talked about, it's not a representative Republican democracy like we have, where you have to think about short election term cycles. They've got power locked in, vertically integrated, so they can think 30, 40, 50 years down the line. And so a lot of this is, let's not screw over the U.S. in the next 3 months, but in the next 10 years. And so we make, and this is common knowledge for people like you, people in the industry, but $40 billion in exports in 2022, I think is what we did to China agriculturally. So we sell them corn, soybeans, grains. Typically, they can't produce enough for their country's demand. Yep. So they are understanding that's a vulnerability of theirs, that they have to rely on the U.S. so heavily for that food sustenance. So what they're trying to do is create like a 10 or 20 year ramp off plan where they basically steal, let's call it steal, borrow agricultural techniques from all the best players in the world, including the U.S., and then home grow and improve their own ability to produce this stuff on Chinese soil. And so they are gathering data from us in real time, which is helping them break their dependence with the U.S. agricultural exporting market. And so we're basically right now, by using their products, giving them the keys to do that faster, easier, and better, to the detriment financially of U.S. farmers. Because, I mean, if you gather enough data, and this is another big misconception, I think people don't visualize data well, but you don't need to spray every single acre. You just need to spray, let's say, 3 or 5% of the acres in the U.S. to have a big enough sample. If you have advanced enough algorithms and AI to analyze that, you can make some pretty dang good predictions about overall yield trends just from a small sample size. So they're basically going to a poker game with us, every year, every harvest, and they're able to see the cards in our hand, and we can't see their cards. So, of course, who do you think is going to win that hand? China, every time for the next 10, 20 years.
I've been accused of being very anti-China by my friend Todd Thurman, who co-hosts the Business of Ag Success Group with me. And I got to tell you, I don't mind if he says that, because I am. And what you're telling me and what I already kind of knew, I think a lot of my listeners suspected this. But anyway, we're going to get into a whole bunch more of this. I'm going to talk about how many acres are actually being covered, and I'm going to talk about where this all goes. My friends at Redox have a great product line that enables your crops to maintain plant charge balance. What's that mean? Every plant takes up nutrients, all of which have an electrical charge. It's either positive or it's negative. Your plants will do whatever is needed then to have an even balance of those charges, right? You know how it is. If a grower's fertility program creates an uneven charge balance, your plants are going to have to work harder, which can compromise your yield and causes stress. So Redox Bionutrients combines 13 key carbon chemistries with biostimulants to achieve plant charge balance. This is an important thing. I think the more we learn, the more we know. Soil health, plant health, feeding the plant versus the soil, all these kinds of things. And now we're talking about plant charge balance. Are your plants unbalanced? With 30 years in business, Redox has a great track record of helping growers. Find out more at redoxgrows.com. Here's the deal, Arthur. This is an obvious concern. And like you said, right now, a person listening to this might say, Damian, all right, you know what? Tinfoil hats and all this kind of thing. Well, again, I don't think that we're tinfoil hat alarmists to say, well, I'm telling you that there's this Chinese Communist Party in this country that obviously goes toe to toe with us and wants to be our replacement, both militarily and economically.
Right.
And like you said, the person listening to this might say, oh, I'm not that worried about. Plus, how many even acres are even getting covered by those drones? As you said, they don't need to cover every acre. They need a representative example. If they cover 1,000 acres in Indiana, 1,000 acres in Texas, 1,000, in other words, you get enough of a sampling, that's all they really need to then say, we think that, and you're saying, well, the USDA already says what our yields are. Sure. That's not what they're looking for. They know what our yields are, 175 bushel corn, 51 bushel soybeans, whatever that is. It's not yields they care about. What are they looking for?
Well, I think it is yields, but on a longer time scale and with more fidelity than we can even predict. Our USDA is, I think, doing their best, but if they're not employing technology like China is, like these precision agricultural drones that can basically map every square centimeter of your field, they're not going to have as good data as China is. And so I think China very soon, depending on how many of their units are deployed across our farmland, could start to have better predictions than even our institutions here, USDA, like you mentioned. So I think it is yield to greater fidelity than we have, which it's like going to the casino, to use that analogy again. If you just have a 0.1% or a 0.5% edge over the house, you're going to make money, right? So that's like counting cards. They don't need to be so much better than us, but if they're just even a little bit better than us, then that trajectory is just going to, that gap between us is just going to split wider and wider and wider. It's also, I think, having snapshots of yield, because if you have this real-time data, essentially you can play the market a lot better. And so if you're noticing that there's going to be, like a bust of corn in a certain county,
that's where, okay, from a predictive standpoint, Arthur, that's where I was wondering, because the person that says, you guys sound, you guys are little chicken littles over here, what's the big deal? I'd say there's the angle on it that if they know where things are going, if they know all that we know from their representative example, then like you said, they can game the markets. They've gamed the markets before anyhow. I mean, how many times was it that they make some big announcement that they're not going to buy anything, so then prices take a tumble, and then after the prices tumble, they buy
it. Yeah,
they have used this, and somehow we still fall for it. I don't understand why. But the other part of it is, what if it's even more nefarious? What if it's not just, hey, we're going to know what's going on so we can game the market? We can understand if what the conditions are and how to use that to our advantage as a customer. What if it's more nefarious than that? What if it's to create outcomes?
That's a good point. And I think this is the part of the conversation where we have to put a little bit asterisk to be like, hey, like we're talking about pretty extreme scenarios, but in military action between two superpowers, you would use every lever that you have access to, right? So if they become entrenched enough, then you can start talking about, okay, if they predict war in 3 years, they might decide that they're going to just shut off all U.S. farmer access to their technology. So like they could just break all their spray drones. This is like imagining a future where it's like every farm has one, and they're very crucial, right?
Sure. And we're not there yet. But like
we're not there yet.
Well, look at this thing that's in my hand. There was a time when you said, I'm going to make it so that the entire smartphone communication system is broken. Well, in 1995, you said, big deal. Well, now you'd say, do you know how much commerce happens because of this thing that's in my hand right now? So if you sabotaged our ability to use cell phones, it would not be the annihilation of our economy, but it would sure as hell take a tremendous. What about, like you said, drones? Right now, there's not a drone out here. There's a tractor in this field behind my house, but there's not a drone out there. But 5 years from now, I think there's going to be drones over every field.
Yeah. Oh, the way they've been attacking the market, and they do a good job of marketing. DJI is a great company in terms of being able to spread their product. Like the way they're going, there's going to be at least one or two of their drones on every single farm in 5-10 years, I would think. Yep. So yeah, it's just a matter of time. It's not a question of if, it's when. And at that point, yes, it's imagining doomsday scenarios, war with China. Why wouldn't you basically ruin a year or two of U.S. yields just to have us flat-footed when we're going into a mobilization for war, right? It'd be a huge lever to pull for them. So that's a question, or that's a topic about just not letting any country or any one company control such a crucial piece of technology in the supply chain. Like to your point, like Tim Cook could just decide, hey, like, I'm turning off all iPhones for a day. I don't know if he could actually do that. I shouldn't speak out of school, but let's say that.
Yeah, let's say the CEO of Apple. You misspoke. You said Tim Apple. Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple. If somehow he had that actual power, they have the ability. There's no question. They have the ability. It's just that whether he's the one that could flip that switch.
It would ruin the economy.
All iPhones in the United States for 1 day, 1 week.
Now here's the difference. A point I was trying to make was that at least Tim Cook has a U.S. residence, and the FBI could go up to his house and arrest him, and there could be some sort of accountability. Now, the CEO of China is of DJI is a Chinese person, right? We don't have any ability to go over there and hold those companies accountable. So they're getting to the same level of power and permanence in our marketplace, in our supply chains, that U.S. companies traditionally have had, but they have no accountability because they are literally across the entire world. So that's a key difference that people need to recognize as well. It's like there is a difference between a monopolistic U.S. company for us U.S. citizens and a monopolistic foreign company. We have somewhat more controlling ability and accountability for the U.S. company, not for the other one. So that's an important detail I think to take note of.
So this company DJI is a competitor of yours. The naysayer is listening to this right now and says, this guy is just coming out here and on your air and talking about this company because it's his competitor. But the reality is, I don't know that anything that we've discussed so far, if it's far-fetched, I think you're being naive or worse yet, dangerous to assume that this isn't a real thing. But to the person that says the only reason you're carrying on about this is because you have a company that's competing with them and they're winning. Answer that criticism.
Yeah, so I will come out and say that I don't personally think a outright ban of their products, which is happening right now in U.S. Congress, at least it's being proposed. I don't think an outright ban of DJI's products is necessary or even the right move for the industry. I do think competition with other players, even from Chinese or other adversary company or countries, I think that's good. And I think that the U.S. companies, Hylio and others, can rise and even exceed that challenge, right? I think we can make better products. I think we can even be more economically scalable than theirs if given up enough time. So yes, they timed the market really well.
Yeah.
Basically, they took all the infrastructure that they have for manufacturing personal electronics and they turned that into this drone industry. And so even 30 years ago and 20 years ago, they were laying the groundwork for this. So kudos to them. They did a great job. But ultimately, it's mostly Western technology and IP that they're leveraging here, stuff that we willingly gave away. Because we don't want to have like a manufacturing economy here, which was a mistake in my opinion, but we're going to bring that back. Okay, long story short, I don't think the ban's the right idea. I do think they need to play by our rules, period, here in the marketplace. If you want to play in the U.S. marketplace, you need to be as accountable as a U.S. company is to the FAA, to the Commerce Department, to the FCC, et cetera. And they're not that right now. They basically, I'm not going to say it's like complete Wild West, but they have a lot more leeway than a company like Hylio would have. There are a bunch of unregistered foreign-made drones from a variety of companies that are just flying in the wind, so to speak, with no sort of tracking and no accountability if something were to go wrong. And that's not the case. We're held to different standards.
Arthur, that's really remarkable because it's the person listening to this is going to be like, wait, what? I'm not sure I understand that because I that should concern everybody, first off.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one is where are these all coming from? So we're going to get to that in a minute. I want to find out where these drones are coming from, and also I want to talk a little bit about what the steps are. Before we do that, hey, you got a down revenue year. Everybody's been talking about it. We're going to have a little bit of a income adjustment here in 2024. So if you are a farmer, you need to make every dollar you can make. Maybe you can diversify your income. What about doing that through a sustainability program? My friends over at Truterra can help you. Truterra is focused on supporting farmers at every stage of their sustainability journey to help plan, make, and maintain regenerative management practices that will improve your agronomic and, most importantly, your economic sustainability. So what you do is you go to TruterraAg.com, Truterra Ag, Truterra, Truterra Ag is part of the Land O'Lakes companies. Point is, sustainability programs are probably here for the long haul, and it's a new way for you to diversify your revenue. I recommend you get into sustainability program. I recommend you go in there and check it out at TruterraAg.com. How many companies are American making drones?
I can count on my hands and my toes the notable players. So not too many.
So about a half dozen.
Sure, maybe even let's say like 5 notable ones.
And is Hylio, is yours notable?
Well, I would say humbly that we are notable because we are the largest player in the spray drone market specifically.
Okay.
So we have the most traction out of any U.S. company in that market, by far. I mean, We're talking like 100x or so.
And again, the kind of drone that like the auction company puts up to take videos of my farm, or the that flies over an event to make it look cool. That's not what you do. You have these big horses, that
correct
can carry 40 pounds or 60 pounds or something like this.
Yeah, even more than that. So I mean, we would call them heavy load UAS. We're talking 200 pounds on our biggest model of payload. So that's could lift a full grown adult. Well, maybe not.
Is it
every single adult?
150? Is it 150 pounds?
200 pounds of payload on the biggest drone that we offer.
250. Okay.
And we're making bigger ones, so they're getting bigger. But yeah, to your point, we're not making the small, snazzy, like media savvy little camera drones.
Arthur, where are your machines actually put together? You're a U.S. company. You're from Houston. You operate your company is headquartered in Houston.
Yeah, that's right. It's I should say Richmond, Texas, which is just south of Houston. It's a suburb of Houston.
Where are the machines assembled and manufactured?
Right there at our headquarters in Richmond, Texas. So we've got a growing staff. We're actually building a new production facility because we basically are just elbows to elbows in our current one, packed like sardines. So yeah, we do as much as we can in-house. Of course, we literally can't produce every single raw component, such as like plastic or carbon fiber. So we do outsource those, but everything is our design, and we do literally build as much as we can in-house.
You a technology company, you an ag company. What do you call yourself?
An ag tech company. I for sure am. I always try to emphasize that we care about agriculture way more than anything else, even though our technology does have a lot of cross-industry.
I was going to say, does your drones end up in any other? Is agriculture the only space that your drones get purchased for and used?
No, so there's ag adjacent stuff, and by that I mean like there's vegetation management for counties and for big retailers across the U.S. service providers. So they'll just spray the weeds on roadways or right of ways,
a power line right of way or something like this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so there's that. There's also like the DoD adjacent stuff, which we're not super heavily involved in, but for sure there's a lot of application there, and there's a lot of conversations we have with DoD contractors and stuff like that for various niche applications, I would say.
Yeah. So the other players, okay, DJI is one that we've talked about because it's got such huge market share. And like you said, they've been out here plowing this for a long time. There are other Chinese companies that are in this space as well, right?
Sure, yeah. So there's like Autel, there's a company called XAG, there's a company called EA Vision, a few others.
All Chinese.
Yeah, these are all Chinese. Yep.
How many besides Hylio, how many others are made here?
So there's Skydio, there's Teal, which I think is now going under Red Cat, is like the name of their parent company. There's Anduril, which is like Palmer Luckey, who you probably heard about. He's doing all the like kamikaze drones. Maybe they're called Switchblade. I don't remember the name, but
you're educating me a lot. You mean like the drones that kill people?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Well, I think Aero Environment might make those actually, and I'm definitely like showing my ignorance, but anyway, there's the defense only focused companies, which is the majority of these U.S. manufacturers that make drones. So they're almost exclusively just servicing the defense industry, whereas Hylio is unique because while we can do that, we definitely don't focus on that, and 99% of our revenue is just agriculturally focused.
Got it. So who is your customer? A farmer or an ag retailer right now?
Both. It's traditionally kind of been split 50-50, but we are now seeing, like as of last year and this year, it's a little bit more the service provider or the retailer.
And, I would have thought that they would have been faster on this, which I hate to say it. Sometimes I think ag retail still thinks it's 1960 because some of what happens in ag retail, they're going to get hopscotched by large scale farmers. In many ways, don't need a retailer, or the services. I mean, it used to be I would run over and pick up fertilizer buggies. It's just there's a few less of those kinds of things as farm consolidation happens. I would have thought that ag retailers would have gone full tilt on purchasing and deploying drone technology. Why do you think they haven't?
Well, what's interesting is like the traditional retailers, I agree with you, aren't adopting it as quickly as they should be, but there's a whole new just contingent of people, everyday people like you and I, who are just starting up new service providers. So it's kind of like a grassroots guerrilla movement where a lot of the marketing tactics for like the resellers of these foreign-made drones is they're trying to sell B2B, and they're trying to give you like their pitch is, hey, we'll sell you the drone, but also the knowledge for you to start your own service providing company. And so that's a lot of like the sales funnel right now, and the dialogue in the marketing is centered around that idea. And so I think that's why we aren't seeing it. If you're to take a census or whatever, you wouldn't see that all the big retailers are doing it, but there's all these hidden people that are just popping up every day that are actually offering those services. So that's what's different about this versus I think like other product launches in the past.
You've been around 9 years.
That's right.
Where'd you come from?
Straight from school. Started the company at UT Austin.
I love it. Investors, I assume?
Just a handful. So we had a handful of angel investors, mostly just from the Houston area, back in 2018, 2019.
So you're like a 23-year-old, 24. You have a graduate degree?
No.
You an
just
engineer?
Undergrad. Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So you're like a 23-year-old kid banging on doors saying, I've got this idea. We're going to build drones for agriculture. And they said, son, we're in Houston. We're in the oil business down here. What are you talking about?
Yeah, more or less. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It actually, like a lot of the angels, I think most of them do have money from oil and gas. Like these are oil and gas professionals that want to put their money somewhere. So that's kind of how that worked out. And we did equity crowdfunding. So that's Yeah, you go online. There's a platform called Start Engine that we did a raise on, and you set a evaluation and just let people buy it if they want to. So we have like a pool of investors from that platform as well.
Your role has changed. You're not an ag guy. You've turned into an ag person because that's where your market is.
Sure, we'll say ag tech. I don't want to pretend like I'm a farmer or know anything like truly about farming. Yeah,
right. Well, you're creating a product that makes farming, more easily done. So you came into this. What's been the biggest learning curve? Learn how to run a company or learning about agriculture?
I think scale manufacturing is hard. So I don't want to trivialize what we've done so far, but I think having a product that can stand up to farmers' demands and their expectations of traditional equipment, like John Deere, of course, they have a great reputation, great products, super reliable, hold their value, et cetera, et cetera. Don't need to go on. Recreating that at scale is difficult. I mean, it's cliche. You hear everybody, Elon Musk talks about how difficult scaling is, and that's why he says like, oh, all of his competitors aren't going to do as well as him because that's what he knows that they don't. So yeah, it's tough. I think the biggest learning curve is just like making that a really robust system and servicing the very hungry U.S. farmers that want this technology and they want it fast and they want it in high quantities.
So that's my next question. If I was, I rent my farm ground out, but if I farmed it, I would probably get a younger person and say, help me with this, because we all know that by the time you're mid-50s, you're still not as good at adopting technology as if you are in your 20s or 30s. And I'd say, let's get into this drone thing. I wouldn't know for sure what one to buy. If I'm listening to this, I'm thinking, well, if it still does the job, what difference does it make? And so your pitch can't just be, oh, well, the Chinese are spying on you. But I would think that would resonate, but I don't know. I don't know if our customer, does your customer care, I guess is the big one. Does your customer care if they think they're being spied on by the Chinese?
It depends on who you talk to. And like the reason I do talks like this anyway is because I just want it to be a topic of discussion. I'm not trying to tell farmers how they should feel about it. If you decide, hey, the price point is what matters to me and I don't really care about the data, that's your choice. That's why America's great. You can decide to buy the technology and use it.
And is DJI cheaper than yours?
Yeah, up front, yes. Initial cost, yes, but that's not the only calculus you need to do for long-term value, right? So therein comes the pitch. I don't want to make it sound like a commercial, but we do try to focus our entire product ecosystem on being more streamlined for the U.S. farmer. So just clearer interfaces, simpler process flows. Basically, like the iPhone of spray drones is the feel we're going for. It just works.
Your plan is, we're not going to be the cheapest, but we're going to make up for that with the ease of use or something like this.
Yeah, long-term value, customer support. So adding features that are going to pay off dividends when it comes to integrating your data with all your other farm equipment and whatnot. Just building that ecosystem to be really usable and friendly.
And you've referenced Apple a couple of times, from the CEO reference to this that are here. And I've switched over in 2012 and became an Apple person. And then I wondered, why in the hell did I take so long to do this? Because of usability, user friendliness, compatibility from the computer to the phone, et cetera, et cetera. So, and it sure as hell ain't the cheapest, technology out there.
No,
but it is.
No way.
What about growth? Is China, do you think that they'll continue? Because maybe the ulterior motive really is the spying. Will they just continue to make, like, for instance, DJI, which, as you said, has direct ties, as many Chinese companies do, to the Chinese Communist Party? Will they just continue to make them so cheap that they basically give them away because all they really want is to be covering American acres for surveillance?
I think they can have their cake and eat it too right now. It's
right now they're getting their surveillance and they're selling the damn things. But
do
you think 5 years from now, when what's more likely, that they just continue to flood the market for surveillance, or that we actually have some people in Washington, D.C. grow some balls, which I don't know that that's ever going to happen, and actually stand up to China in these kinds of fronts and say, you're not going to put your drones aren't allowed in our country?
I would think, based on conversations I'm hearing, that the latter is going to happen. I'm hopeful that there's going to be some conversation with these manufacturers. And I mentioned it before. My point is not like an outright ban. I don't want that. I do want them to sit at the table and renegotiate, so to speak, on better terms here. Like this isn't sustainable. What's happening right now to the American consumer, and frankly, I don't want to speak for them because I'm not over there, but I don't think their model is sustainable for their worker base and their industrial base. I mean, you can't just keep providing these, with cheap labor and not great conditions, their factories. You can't just do that forever. There's going to be a breaking point. So we can sit down together. It doesn't have to be a zero-sum game, right? We can both get something out of this exchange. But that requires maturity and conversation. So we'll see if they're in large supply in the future.
I like your optimism. I'm probably in a little bit of, I'm not big on overregulation on anything. But when it comes to national security, I don't know that anything other than a ban would work for this. I don't know that anything other. You said you're not really supporting a ban on the sale of Chinese-made drones into the United States ag sector. I don't know what short of a ban would accomplish. In other words, that's the only thing that I could see in my mind working.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. At the end of the day, it's about practicality, right? And you can only get, that's our government these days, right? It has to be a pretty polarizing idea, I think, to get through for the most part. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have an answer for you. Like, I think if you were to restructure it and have like an American company distributing some of their technology, with like, an American board, an American CEO, American just everything. Maybe. Well, and the thing is, Arthur, there are still workarounds. We recorded an episode of this show about a couple of months ago about Chinese ownership of farmland in the United States. My state of Indiana just passed legislation that went into effect July 1st, that if you're from one of the 6 evil countries, you cannot, if you are an entity from Venezuela, Cuba, North Korea, Iran, Russia, China, you can't own farmland in the United States or in the state of Indiana. Sure.
That's cool. But what if you're a Chinese entity and you set up an LLC in Toronto, and then it becomes North of the Border Investors LLC buys the farm down the road? I'm like, I guess it's a Canadian company. How the hell are you going to know? I'm afraid that could be the same thing on the drone front. Oh,
for sure. Yeah, there absolutely will be.
I mean, a Chinese ownership with the Chinese Communist Party backing could own Hylio. They don't.
Sure.
I'm not.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden, what are you surveilling? What are you doing? You get the information also from your drones.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And then does it just go to, and then you hold it in a on the cloud and then say, we're going to always have this for you, farmer?
Yeah, but I mean, more or less, yes. So leadership matters. I think, different companies handle it different ways. Our business model, we are not interested in making money off of your data. We are truly interested in just giving that data back to you so you can improve your yields and your productivity. So that it's stored, it's safe, it's encrypted. That's just for your access. We also offer, like on the other hand, completely operate in a vacuum mode, right? So operate completely offline. And that's important for a lot of our government contractors. They actually can't have any sort of connectivity, 4G or Wi-Fi or anything. So on their drones, they can just operate in a vacuum.
Yep.
And we offer that, and that's actually not very common in the other platforms.
Yeah, you make it so that if they want to just, there's no collection of nothing. It's just a machine, right?
Yeah, if you're a CIA Black Ops team, you can take this drone, not have any connectivity except for just a line of sight radio transmitter to it, and go do whatever you got to do with it, and no one's going to know about it.
Yeah. What about the person listening to this says, all right, well, I've got a Chinese drone, but it's not DJI, so I'm safe. The skeptical side in me says, if it's made in China and I don't think there is such a thing as a Chinese-based company that isn't in bed with the Chinese Communist Party. That's just my sensibilities. Your answer to them would be maybe not.
Yeah. To the top of our conversation, any company in China does have a responsibility when push comes to shove to give data up to the Chinese government. So they could just walk in at any moment and be like, I need it. So it doesn't matter if it's DJI or any of these other Chinese companies. Like, that's the same requirement for all of them.
We asked a question at the beginning of the show, are Chinese drones spying on American agriculture. I think we both unequivocally thought that it was indeed the case, and you just told me that it is. And you talked about the other companies, and you told me about how big it is. 5 years from now, there's going to be drones, again, maybe not on every acre, but damn near every acre. Am I right?
Yeah. And I think that people aren't expecting this either. It's hard to wrap your mind around. And like, I read a lot of sci-fi, for example, but there's this idea of the technological cradle, right? Which is, maybe we're already there, but are we going to become so dependent on our machines that we literally forget how to live without them? So I'll ask a rhetorical question, like 20 years from now, whatever it is, let's say farming is completely automated. So there's walking robots that look like humans, there's drones doing everything. And literally you're just like, your next meal is going to come from a robot, and almost no human oversight was involved in the entire process. Now, do you want that to be owned by a foreign company, like that entire process chain, like what's putting food on your table? Do you want that to be owned by a Chinese company or a Russian company? Or would you prefer that to be owned by a US company where you could actually go knock on their door and talk to the people that build them and operate them? Probably the latter, right? Most people would say that.
Yeah. And that's, I forever have told my audiences, Arthur, that the consumer needs to understand ag's role in national security. And you've just very well articulated that time, 5, 10, 20 years from now, which isn't that long, where this technology is already replacing human labor because we have a hard time getting labor. Right. We've got all these forces. And do you want that automation technology, that innovative technology, to be held by companies that are housed, domiciled in countries that are hostile to the United States? And that's the question you just asked. I think that I know the answer that most of my listeners are going to come up with, and I think you do too. If you want to learn more about Hylio and Arthur Erickson, where do we find you? You on LinkedIn, Arthur?
I am on LinkedIn. I don't really update it, so it's not too useful. But I do plenty of interviews like this, so you could just Google my name and probably find all sorts of bad and good stuff about me. Hopefully more good.
It's Erickson, like the first name, Eric, and then with a K, son. Arthur Erickson. The company is Hylio, hylio.com, no doubt.
Yeah, you can go to hylio.com or Hylio or hyl.io. So we have two domains. Hylio.com is the easier one to remember, obviously.
All right, Hylio.com. His name's Arthur Erickson. He's awesome. I'm glad he came on to do this show for you, talking about Chinese drones and the threat to American sovereignty, frankly. And is it a national security issue? Well, we posed a question and he gave you a lot of information. You know what? This is a show as well as just being an audio podcast. It's a television show that you can watch on Acres TV. I encourage you to do that. The Hefty Brothers invented Acres TV. It's go to just type in Acres TV. It's watch Acres TV, and also on YouTube. My channel is the Damian Mason channel. I'd love for you to hit subscribe. It's free. You'll hear my commentary and see my videos out there. And we put up a new episode like this every week. So thanks for being here, Arthur Erickson.
Thank you, Damian.
All right. Until next time, I'm Damian Mason, and this is The Business of Agriculture. Well, that concludes another fantastic episode of The Business of Agriculture. This episode was brought to you by Pattern Ag. Everybody in agriculture understands the importance of soil health. We also keep an eye on our soil better than we ever did through advanced soil testing. But what if there was a company that provided predictive analytics, not just checking out nutrients and all the elements that are in there, but also could tell you the degree of risk you face with disease and pest pressure? That's right, Pattern Ag can do that. They actually can tell you, hey, you're going to have a real issue here. You can proactively treat for corn rootworm or cyst nematode or sudden death syndrome before the problem actually starts costing you yield. Go to pattern.ag, that's www.pattern.ag, to find the nearest rep that can help you start doing better for your soil.